Hey, second to last teaching out of the Ezra/Nehemiah scroll. Remember, two books in our Bible, but one scroll to the Jews and the Israelites. It's always in one scroll, and we're going to kick it off in Nehemiah chapter 10 tonight. But we will be finishing next week. We only have one chapter next week. It's a long story. I didn't think I could squeeze it all in tonight, so it might be fairly short. But I realized something really radical about 3 or 4 days ago about the ending of the book of Nehemiah that is going to perfectly set us up to kick off Matthew in the last week of May. I think it's May 28th, or the last Tuesday in May, I think, is when we're going to kick off the Matthew study, which, by the way, I'm telling you guys all that right now because I want you to tell your friends. I'm going to promo it really hard at church. Look, I look around the room. This is the deep end of the pool. Like, not many people want to come out on a Tuesday night to hear about some Ezra, Nehemiah thing, but you guys have been really faithful. Tonight's our 11th week, and I commend you all for hanging in there, you know. But I think Matthew's going to be much more, as you're probably aware, accessible to the neophyte, as it were, you know. And I would really like to sort of fill this room with people that have maybe never done an in-depth study of the Word, because we are going to go real in-depth. I'm thinking it's going to take us a year or more to get through Matthew, yeah. And why hurry, right? Why hurry? We're gonna do the deep dive, and we'll go line by line or word by word if we have to, yeah. So I'm kind of excited about that, really excited about that. But we'll finish up Nehemiah next week, and it's fun. I think we'll find it interesting how it's going to set us up perfectly for Matthew, which was unintentional, but maybe God did intend it. I don't know. But before we get there, I heard this amazing thing the other day. I was listening to some news article or on the radio or something, and I was kind of blowing my mind. This guy was saying we are having a global birth rate crisis, that the birth rate is falling, and that this will be bad for humanity. I know, thank you. And I was like, wait, you guys were all there in the 70s, maybe not you, Jen, but everybody else remembers this. Everybody else here was here for the 70s. Well, maybe not you, Shannon, either. Tom, maybe, I don't know, but am I remembering things wrong? Or in the 70s, wasn't it like the population boom was going to kill us all? And you know what I thought of? I go, this sounds like the whole paper plastic thing all over again. Do you remember when we were being scolded? Don't use paper bags. You're killing the trees. Use plastic. Now, if you ask for a plastic bag, you're like, you know, like they keep flip-flopping. Which one is it?
Are eggs good for us this year or
Yeah,
not?
are eggs good for us this year or not? Right, thank you. That's a great statement. Are eggs good for it or coffee? One day coffee's going to kill you. The next day it's saving your life, you know? Like, which, you know which way I lean on that one, right?
My coffee, yeah.
Anyways, that's going to come up later in the study tonight. I just thought I'd intro with that. But basically, we're at the very end of the recorded history, the history portion of the Old Testament. Yeah, this is the final story. They've been away in captivity in Babylon, creating what we now call Second Temple Judaism, which is sort of identified with 3 solid ideas, them being a separate people, the elevation of Scripture so that they become known as the people of the book, and the rise of the synagogue as a legitimate form of worship. Of course, they come back 3 movements over 100 years to Jerusalem. I'm going to go ahead and speed ahead. We had Zerubbabel. I've been practicing, man. Zerubbabel. Dan, you missed it, but he was Zerubbabel for a long time. Yeah, sorry. I just can't get my head around it. Yeah, but then Ezra and now Nehemiah. I did want to make a quick point overall. I was thinking about this yesterday while I was reviewing and studying. I really noticed this great combination of Ezra and Nehemiah. It's really great. Ezra, the priest, and Nehemiah, the civil leader. And yet, there doesn't seem to be any power conflict with these two guys. And I also noticed, and I wonder if you did, there is kind of a pretty neat overlap in their skill set. Whereupon Nehemiah, in the 13 years before Ezra got there, was pretty darn good at organizing people, right?
Yeah.
And Nehemiah is no slouch when it comes to his knowledge of the scriptures. And I'm thinking, this is a really interesting concept. We've got a religious leader and a civil leader. They both seem to have a foot in the other guy's boat. And yet we don't sense competition amongst them. In fact, what we sense is a fantastic working together, a fantastic sense of cooperation and community. Anyways, yesterday, that really kind of jumped out at me. So anyways, they get the temple rebuilt, they get the walls rebuilt, despite plenty of threats and opposition from their neighbors. Last week felt like a joyous occasion. There was a public reading of the word and a very heartfelt desire of even amongst the common folk to listen to sit under, and to learn the word. Remember, it wasn't even just the public reading, it was the translation from the Hebrew. That, by the way, was one of the more eye-opening things I learned last week, this concept of many of these Jews didn't speak Hebrew.
Right.
And that the word had to be translated into Aramaic for them. And then furthermore, this idea that they're actually, in hearing the Torah being read, the Pentateuch, it was an ancient document. And remember, we did the math on it. It would be, Dan, I thought this, you might find this fascinating. I never thought of it this way, but you might find this interesting, Dan, is imagine if I were to open up right now and read a scroll from 924 AD in ye olde English, or in Saxon, or I mean, we might not even understand a thing that was going on, right? These guys are reading over 1,100-year-old document, right, to children and kids that don't even speak Hebrew. And it really dawned on me for the first time, like, this is a very learning experience for these guys. They're hearing things and going, hang on, what? In fact, so much so that when they're done with the reading, they jump right into the Feast of Tabernacles. Shouldn't we be building tents about now, right? You know? And they do that. And by the way, that was considered to be a big, very large. Remember the quote from the rabbi, "You've never partied unless you've been in Jerusalem for the Feast of Tabernacles." That was sort of my translation. I don't think he said that, but yeah, you know, I guess it's what happens at the Feast of Tabernacles stays at the Feast of Tabernacles. I don't know, yeah. Anyways, we ended last week. I thought that was excellent and a lot of just really insightful for us. We ended last week, Ron and Dan, with having everybody stand up as we had a reading of the Word, a public reading of Scripture. And thank you for that, everybody that volunteered to read, Garrett and Janet. That was just, and the Anchor House boys who aren't here tonight. I scared them off by having them read in public. Yeah, whatever, yeah. By the way, and as a total aside, unless you saw my email, if you saw my email, you'll get this already. But while I was preparing, I began my preparation yesterday while I was preparing. This 80s New Wave song got stuck in my head. And I ended up humming it all day yesterday. You make me promises. Do. Yeah? Now, good. I wanted it to get stuck in your head, because if that song gets stuck in your head, you'll really appreciate it when we get to next week. Because what we're going to get tonight is promises. And if you've already read ahead of chapter 13, you read it tonight, you're like, yeah. But we'll get there next week. Okay, so let's enjoy tonight. So we're actually going to finish the last verse. This again goes to show us once again that though we believe the Scriptures to be the inerrant Word of God, we fully recognize that whoever put the chapters and verses was not enlightened by God. Because clearly the last verse of chapter 9 is supposed to be the first verse of chapter 10. But, you know, when these guys were reading it in scroll form, it just bled one into the next. But anyway, so we start actually with chapter 9, verse 38. In view of all this, we are making a binding agreement, putting it in writing, and our leaders, our Levites and our priests are affixing their seals to it. So the people want to do this. They want to make this binding agreement. Now, I got kind of a little bit excited when it said, in view of all this, because that is pretty much a good translation straight from the Greek, the first line of Romans 12:1, which after, 11 chapters of the theology of everything God has done for us, verse 12, Paul says, therefore, in the view of all that, right, be transformed by the renewing of your mind, and all the rest of Romans 12, how you live out your salvation. But unfortunately, when I went and did the Hebrew version, it's not remotely the same. Sorry. So I got all excited. It just means, it basically translates in all of this, and I didn't really do a very good job of reviewing all that, but basically they did a massive amount of confession leading up to this, okay? All this confession in the light of all this reading of Scripture, in all this praying and fasting. Let's cut, that's literally from the Hebrew, let's cut an agreement together. I looked for the word in the Hebrew covenant, and it does not appear in there. I thought they were ratifying the covenant with God, but they do not. And so it's a different kind of agreement that they're making here with them. I mean, maybe they're agreeing to uphold the covenant, but they don't seem to be, the Hebrew terminology is not there for, and no observable sacrifice, at least not yet. They're not sacrificing either. And this idea of asking for the seals of the officials is kind of unprecedented. I mean, we all know what that is. And it's not like the first time a seal has ever happened in the history of the Old Testament. But this idea that the people would sort of confess their sins, enter into agreement, and have the leaders seal it, there's not a lot of precedent for that. Then we get into one of everybody's favorite things about Ezra and Nehemiah scroll, which is another list. And Ron asked me over dinner, Dain, are you going to make that list interesting like you did the last one? And I said, no, I'm going to skip it. Because, quite frankly, I did the one list. I dug deep. We found, but it's the same people. I couldn't find anything. We've got about 3 lists tonight. I did find 2 interesting things, but otherwise, this is basically from chapter 10, verse 1, all the way to verse 27 is a list of leaders, priests, and Levites. Ezra doesn't mention himself, or he's not mentioned. Perhaps he's writing it, yeah. And then verse 28 to 30, let's just read that briefly. The rest of the people, priests, that's chapter 10, verse 28. The rest of the people, priests, Levites, gatekeepers, singers, temple servants, and all who separated themselves from the neighboring peoples for the sake of the law of God, together with their wives and all their sons and daughters who are able to understand. All these now join their brothers, the nobles, and bind themselves. This is interesting. Bind themselves with a curse and an oath to follow the law of God given through Moses, the servant of God, and to obey. Now that's interesting because the law is a covenant, so they're binding themselves with a curse and an oath to follow the covenant, okay? Moses, the servant of God, to obey carefully all the commandments, regulations, and decrees of the Lord, our Lord, Yahweh, our Lord. And we promise, and I love this, we promise not to give our daughters in marriage to the peoples around us, or to take their daughters for our sons, okay? So this is interesting, only interesting to me here because, just because of this one quote, because we're always wondering, did they really send away the people that had been married already, which has this horrible visual, the optics aren't good, of, daddy, no, go away, whatever, yeah. But, some scholars suggest, I'm actually quoting here from a commentary, that on the basis of this verse, that those who had kept separate from the people of the land includes converts who were accepted from the surrounding population. So we can't prove that, but it does leave the door open to the idea that it wasn't so much, no, you were born an Ammonite, you're out of here, as much as it was, you're with us, you're a Jew, you're a convert, which for men was a heavy price, right? Circumcision, anybody? Okay, yeah, just saying, yeah? Yeah. Was it like that? I don't know, I don't know, yeah. I don't know, right? Or you're out. Now, by the way, I've said this every time, and it sounds like I'm defending God, and I don't like to do that, but I think it's worth saying. There's a couple of reasons why. It's interesting in the concept, or in the context, of Ezra, the religious leader, Nehemiah, the civil leader. There was both religious and civil ramifications to marrying outside the faith. Religious was you were being then tempted to follow Baal and the gods, or bring the gods of a pagan religion into the household. But in the civil sense, it created enormous difficulties regarding the land. Remember, land is always a really enormous big deal to God in the promised land. In fact, it's going to come up at the end of the study tonight as everybody goes back to their land. And that is if your son takes a daughter from another tribe or the other way around and one of them dies, where does the land go? And if the land's going outside of Israel, this is a loss. Okay, so isn't that interesting? Religious and civil reasons for that. And then we drop down, it starts in verse 31. Starting in verse 31, this section is actually called the Nehemiah Code. And I'm going to skip around a little bit, but let's just read 31. When the neighboring peoples bring merchandise or grain to sell on the Shabbat, we will not buy from them on the Shabbat or on any holy day. Every 7th year, we will forego working the land and will cancel all the debts. So on the one hand, there's a basic, we're going to honor the Sabbath, right? Basic. By the way, one scholar pointed out, it's really interesting. It's the same exact verbiage when it says we will not take their daughters for our sons. And it says we will not take from the people to buy from them. It's the same exact word, yeah? We won't take their daughters for our sons, nor will we receive or take their merchandise on the Shabbat. Anyways, it's one of those little word plays some people find interesting. But I love the fact that they seem to be desiring to resurrect the Sabbath year, which, remember, was it 2 weeks ago? When the poor people, the oppressed poor, came to Nehemiah and said, hey, all these brothers that we're bumping elbows with while we build the wall, they've like kept us out economically, and they are oppressing us, and they are, remember, selling us into slavery when we can't make up our debts. And what does Nehemiah do? He calls the whole gathering together and he says, you are basically going to release everybody from slavery and forgive all their debts. And I remember what we said when we studied that. We're like, wow, it's almost like a Sabbath year, releasing the debts. And now look, they're actually ratifying, hey, you know what? This works. We're going to keep doing this. So they re-enlist or whatever, re-ratify, whatever the word is, yeah, all that. Now, it's interesting because obviously they were under pressure to buy and sell on the Sabbath. And just on a very quick applicational note, I got to thinking about it, and I was trying to think back in my memory, and I'm not sure if I'm remembering this correctly. So if you've been here for Donna, you've been here, and Tom, you've been here forever, yeah? But I seem to remember I meant forever, you know what I mean, yeah. Why did you laugh at that? Anyways, I thought when I moved here, were the gas stations still closed on Sundays? That's what I thought. I remember them being closed. And I know for sure they were closed on Christmas Day. Yeah? Because I remember telling people, telling tourists and stuff, make sure you gas up because you can't get gas on Christmas Day. But were they closed on Sundays too? I don't remember. You don't remember either?
Don Muma, a great UCLA All-American football player. He wouldn't go to the NFL. He went to the Canadian League.
Because they
didn't play on Sunday.
Yeah, good for them. That's good for them, yeah.
Easy first-round draft pick, way up. But he told him way ahead he would.
That's cool. That's really cool. And it would have been a first-round draft pick, yeah? Oh, good for him. My own thing is don't ever talk to me or text me football scores on Sunday, because I'm taping it so I can be at church and then go watch my football. There's nothing worse than I'm walking out to the parking lot, my phone buzzes, and I look down, too bad about your Chargers. Just on my way home. Just going to eat lunch. Yes, Dan. Eric Little, the runner. Yeah.
One of the heats was on Sunday.
Chariots of Fire.
I will not.
Dun, 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 dun. Dun, dun, dun.
But instead he ran a different heat.
Yeah.
Which is not his, and then he won.
And then he won. Yeah, that's a great story. Chariots of Fire. Yeah, fantastic story. He was a really great guy. Obviously went on to a great mission field in China, I think it was. Yeah. Yeah. Died in China on the mission field. Fantastic. Okay. You can tell we're stretching for applications in tonight's lesson. That was a bit of a stretch, but thank you. That was fun. I rather enjoyed that, yeah? Okay, so let's continue with the sort of the recommitment to the Shabbat laws, 32 and 34. Oops, I got lost. Sorry, my pages blew around and I put a... Whoops. Okay, what is it? Okay, we assume, this is good. Yeah, we assume the responsibility for carrying out the commands to give 1/3 of a shekel each year for the service of the house of our God, for the bread set on the table, for the regular grain offerings and the burnt offerings, for the offerings on the Sabbaths, the new moon festivals, and the appointed feasts, for the holy offerings, for sin offerings, to make atonement for Israel, and for all the duties of the house of our God. We, the priests, the Levites, and the people, have cast lots to determine when each of our families is to bring to the house of our God at set times each year a contribution of wood to burn on the altar of the Lord our God, as it is written in the law. Now, this is interesting. First of all, in keeping with the order, by the way, it's interesting. He says these verses right here are talking about observing the Sabbath and keeping the law. By the way, that's pretty much a direct quote from Leviticus, all the way back, 1,000 years earlier. In Leviticus 26:2, God says, observe my Sabbaths and have reverence for my sanctuary. That's what I meant to say. Sorry. Observe the Sabbaths and revere the sanctuary, yeah? So they're supposed to support financially the elements of the temple. And by the way, apparently 1/3 of a shekel went up, I guess inflation. By the time of Jesus, it's 1/2 shekel. So these guys kind of got off lightly. Per year. Yeah, I know. Yeah, per year. Anyways, yeah. But it went up to 1/2 shekel at the time of Jesus. Now, the wood offering I found interesting because sure enough, that does not occur in the Pentateuch. It is not actually in the Levitical law, but it becomes a thing here. And by the time of Josephus, we were talking about Josephus over dinner tonight, it has actually become a full-fledged, you ready for this? The festival of the wood offering.
Oh.
I know, isn't that interesting? It kind of morphed, and I kind of wonder if what happened was, even though it wasn't like part of the Levitical law, maybe at the time of Moses there were more trees and less people, and as time went on, they're like, Nehemiah, could you go grab some wood? And he's like, I'm kind of busy. Well, somebody's got to go get wood. And they're like, I got an idea. Let's draw lots. And the families can bring wood. And then over time, it became the festival of the wood giving. But if you think about it, if at a certain point, man, the sacrifices are going night and day, am I wrong?
Yeah.
That's a lot of wood. And if you've been to Israel, it can get pretty dry. So anyways. Yeah, well, you know what? I thought of it. Nowhere in the New Testament are we to celebrate Christmas and Easter. And yet here we are. How fun was Sunday, by the way, yeah? Isn't that great? Sunday was great, yeah. Okay, let's move on. This is kind of textbook stuff here. Nothing super interesting. 35 to 39, just giving the first fruits. We also assume responsibility for bringing to the house of the Lord each year the first fruits of our crops and every fruit tree. As it is also written in the law, we will bring the firstborn of our sons and of our cattle, of our herds and of our flocks to the house of our God, to the priests ministering there. Moreover, we will bring to the storeroom of the house of our God, to the priests, the first of our ground meal, of our grain offerings, of the fruit of all our trees, and all of our new wine and oil. And we will bring a tithe of our crops to the Levites, for it is the Levites who collect the tithes in all the towns where we work. A priest descended from Aaron is to accompany the Levites when they receive the tithes, and the Levites are to bring 1/10 of the tithes, so the Levites tithe too, up to the house of our God, to the storerooms of the treasury, and the people of Israel, including the Levites, are to bring their contributions of grain, new wine, and oil to the storerooms, where the articles for the sanctuary are kept, and where the ministering priests, the gatekeepers, and the singers stay. And then this is a great quote right here. We will not neglect the house of our God, yeah? And by the way, they kind of stepped it up here a little bit. It's kind of cool. Apparently in the Torah, The Torah only asks for fruit from 7 kinds of plants, but they actually say, no, we'll bring everything we will bring. So it's kind of cool. Lots of enthusiasm now, but remember the song, you make me promises. Okay, that song's here, right? And then we have basic collection instructions for tithing. If you've been through Leviticus with me, you know all this numbers and all those. But I love that quote, we will not neglect the house of our God. Okay, then we move into chapter 11. Let's just read the first 2 verses, and then it's a really long list. Okay, now, the leaders of the people settled in Jerusalem, and the rest of the people cast lots to bring 1 out of every 10 to live in Jerusalem, the holy city, while the remaining 9 were to stay in their towns. The people commended all the men who volunteered to live in Jerusalem. So you're wondering why I brought up that study about the earth is losing population and everything? Well, this is really interesting, and in fact, it's gonna come up again in just a minute, and we'll go back to it. Well, I'll say it right now. Anyways, but remember, this is what happened is, as we're going to find out in the next set of lists and things, everybody's going to their ancestral land, right? Mm-hmm. But historians reckon that when the Babylonian invasion happened 100 and some odd years earlier, right? Yeah. The people that lived within the walls bore the brunt of the violence and lost a lot of people. And therefore, there weren't actually enough people left to inhabit. And remember, a lot of the houses inside the walls were in disrepair. And the reason why they weren't being rebuilt is nobody was claiming them because people were claiming their lands, and you can't blame them. Because what do they have on the lands? Flocks and grain and fruit trees and what have you. What's that?
Milk and honey.
Milk and honey, right? And it's kind of crazy, especially if you've been to Jerusalem and you know how insanely crowded it is, right? It's crazy to think they did not have enough people. Now, this is interesting. Apparently, this was a common thing done by Assyria, by Persia, by Babylon. When they needed to stock a city, they would go out and forcibly grab people and make them move into the city because they needed people to help them run their cities, right? What we're seeing here is they are asking, notice the number they're asking, 1/10. Yeah. They're asking the villages to tithe people. Isn't that interesting, yeah? And then you gotta love the fact that they also say, and the people commended all the men. And when they say the men, they meant the families. They commended the families for making a sacrifice for doing that. I thought, actually, that was really cool. Excuse me. By the way, excuse me. Wait, where am I in here? 31. Oh, did I get ahead of myself here? Oh, no, I haven't got there yet. That's what it is. No, I'm going to stop right there. Let's just move on. Okay, so verses 3 to 19. We will not read.
Nope.
It's a list. You pretty much know the list already. It's a list, as I wrote in my notes, nothing to report here. Okay, but you skip down to, let's skip all the way down to verse 20. Basically, okay, so the rest of the Israelites with the priests and the Levites were in all the towns of Judah, each on his ancestral property. So that sort of proves what we just said about why Jerusalem was so barren. And by the way, this is one of those little interesting tidbits I found today. But apparently, you know, in all the archaeological digs they've ever done in the area of Israel, they've never found a coin of Judah outside of the territories of Judah. And the only reason I say that, it is further archaeological proof of everything that we're reading right here is backed up by archaeology. Everybody went to their town, they stayed there, and they had within, you know, their little economy within them. And then verse 31, where are we? 11:31. I'm dropping all the way down because I just didn't find anything else super interesting above there. But I thought this was interesting. 31, the descendants of the Benjamites. Remember, they're still there. We always think of Judah, but half of Benjamin stayed with Judah during the big civil war. They lived in Michmash. What a great name for a town. Mishmash. Yeah. Asia, Bethel, and the settlements in Ananoth, Nob, and Ananiah, in Hazar, Ramah, and Gittim, in Hadid, Zeboim, Nebalat, and in Lod. I'll come back to that in a second. And Ono.
Oh no.
That was the Hawaiian contingent. Yeah. It was number one. And in the valley of the craftsmen. Yeah. And some of the divisions of the Levites of Judah settled in Benjamin. Okay, so the Benjamites, remember the minority of the remnant, yeah? Only two interesting things I found here, but I thought this is interesting. The town of Lod, L-O-D, Lod. Some of you in this room have been there. That is the exact location where you land on the runway at Ben Gurion Airport right now.
Lod.
That was Lod. So if you've ever flown to Israel, you've been to Lod, yeah? Now, what's interesting to me about that, and just so you know, I'm kind of a Bible nerd and I piqued my interest, so I wasted way too much time making sure I was correct on this, and I was. Who was originally supposed to settle that land? There's a bonus question for you. What tribe was a sad sack and could not successfully defeat the Philistines there? Dan, good answer, Tom. Which is why Dan ended up going all the way to the most northern reaches. Remember that? Where they beat up on the poor, what was the name of the town that Abraham went into, where Abraham's gate is? No, I'd remember it. No, it was Tel Dan. Tel Dan is the name of it, but that's Laish. Did you say Laish? Yeah. Laish. Sorry, did you say Laish? Sorry, I didn't hear
I
it.
said Lachish because I couldn't.
You said Lachish, yeah.
I knew it was something like that.
So remember Dan fails. This is back in the time of like Joshua. Sorry, Dan, we don't mean to offend you, bro. But they fail to kick out the Philistines, and they don't have any land. And so somebody goes, there's this really weak tribe up in the north. They're called the Lashes or something like that. So they go up there, and of course, if you've been on the Israel trip, you've stood there at the altar where the tribe of Dan was sacrificing to Baal up until the time the Assyrians came and took him out. Well, now we finally have an Israeli tribe. The Benjamites are actually now inhabiting the land that Dan was supposed to inhabit. Okay? Anybody find that stuff interesting? I don't know. Sorry, guys. I do. Okay. But lastly, they didn't have enough Levites in Benjamin, and so Judah gave them some Levites. All right. Okay. So chapter 12 starts with yet again another big list, and then we'll get to the dedication of the law. So chapter 12, verses 1 to 26, even the commentators were over it. Can you imagine how much work it is to put a commentary together of Ezra and Nehemiah? And I think they as well can see the finish line coming. And they had nothing to say about this list, yeah? By the way, this list seems to go back to the time of Zerubbabel. As if we haven't had enough water go under the bridge since then, right? Okay, so I'm going to skip to the last line, which is verse 26. And they served in the days of Joachim, son of Jeshua, the son of Dada, and in the days of Nehemiah, the governor, and of Ezra, the priest and scribe. I love how they're put together right there. Very comfortable overlap of the religious and civil rulers. Oh, but by the way, one last thing. We did skip one cool line. If you read verse 24, chapter 12, verse 24, and the leaders of the Levites, and the leaders of the Levites were Hashabiah, Sherebiah, Jeshua, son of Kedamal, and their associates, who stood opposite them to give praise and thanksgiving, one section responding to the other as prescribed by David, the man of God. That is our call and response. I believe they were probably referencing the very verses that we sang tonight, His love endures forever, where the priest would call out the line from history and the congregation would respond his love endures forever. So I thought you might find that interesting. Some commentators really enjoyed the fact that David was referred to as the man of God. Okay?
So then you have to go back to 11 in the list that you skipped over.
11?
Uh-huh.
Sure, yeah, okay, no.
Because the first light that you read every day was influenced by, we used to call him old Matt here, in 11:17.
Oh, chapter 11.
Chapter 11.
Okay, go ahead.
Verse 17. There was a guy at Manhattan.
Okay.
Who was the
Mattaniah?
director who led in Thanksgiving.
Oh, yeah, got it.
They had a specific director of Thanksgiving.
That's kind of cool.
That's awesome.
That is really
and
cool.
That's why we have in First Light, we have the Thankful Thrive at the beginning.
That's why we have the Thankful Thrive.
That's why you have the Thankful
That
Thrive.
is cool.
Because a group of ladies
Director of
and I,
Thanksgiving.
We're so excited about the Director of Thanksgiving.
What a great job.
There you go. Right?
Right? Can you imagine? Tom's the director of Thanksgiving. Tom, how you doing today? I'm
God.
so grateful.
Can't even talk about it. So good.
That's great. Hey, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Because I'm gonna think of that tomorrow when I'm doing my first light.
They
Yeah.
had a guy who was
They had a guy.
specific for that.
The director of Thanksgiving.
Needs to be one in every church.
I know. That's what I was thinking. That we need to have one around here. Well, that's just you, Jen.
Okay, I'll do
All
it.
right, you're the director of
You don't
Thanksgiving.
even have to pay me. I'll just do it.
All right. Good. All right. Verses 12, 27 to 30. At the dedication of the wall of Jerusalem, the Levites were sought out from where they lived. Oh, by the way, we're getting into the dedication. So this is going to be a big party. Okay. So where they lived and were brought to Jerusalem to celebrate joyfully the dedication with songs of thanksgiving and with the music of cymbals, harps, and lyres. The singers were also brought together from the region around Jerusalem, from the villages. Doesn't this sound like fun? The Nepa, whatever, and Beth Gilgal from the area of Jebo and, Azmarath. And the singers had built villages for themselves around Jerusalem. And when the priests and Levites had purified themselves ceremonially, they purified the people, the gates, and even the wall. Now, it was interesting. Some commentators really got their gander up about why were they purifying the walls? And some people speculated, well, maybe because of the slaughter that happened, the walls were unclean, or I don't know what. But you could, normally you purify the temple, but this is sort of unusual to be purifying the walls or what have you. But everybody who was just described as being where they were settled outside of Jerusalem now is called back to Jerusalem. And again, there isn't really a precedent for cleaning the walls other than like sort of dedicating things and cleaning them seems to be kind of almost a natural human trait. I did a house blessing last week, and I was thinking about it as I read this because, when we do a house blessing, I don't really bless the walls. I bless the people, right? The inhabitants of the building, that they will bring the presence of God into the house, and that is what will bless the house, if that makes sense, yeah? But anyways, rituals are great and are a big deal, and it was definitely a way to celebrate, and give glory to God, the victory, because it is a victory, of the fact that they got the walls built in, 58 days? I forgot. It was 58 something days, I think it was. Yeah, they did this. And so the next line, verse 31 to 39, I might skip around a little bit there, but it reminds me of, when I was a kid on Saturdays or maybe Sundays sometimes, we had an old black and white TV, and I sometimes would watch. Do you guys remember the old, of course you do because everybody here is from my era. Do you remember the old Mickey Rooney, Judy Garland movies? And did you ever notice it was always the same exact plot? The school was going to go bankrupt, or the orphanage was going to go bankrupt, and somebody was going to get kicked out of their house, and Mickey Rooney would go, I know, we'll put on a show. We'll raise money, right? I don't know. Over the years, I'm like, that's the same plot. What? Didn't we watch that last week? Because every Sunday, same. Well, this is kind of what they're going to do. Because look what they do here. So verse 31. So I had the leaders go up on top of the wall, and I also assigned 2 large choirs to give thanks. This is so much fun. One was to proceed on top of the wall to the right toward the dung gate. Hoshea and half the leaders of Judah followed them, along with Ezra, Meshullam, Judah, Benjamin, Shemaiah, Jeremiah, as well as some of the priests with trumpets, and also Zechariah, son of Jonathan, the son of Shemaiah, the son of Shemaiah. Keep going. Hanai, with musical instruments prescribed by David, the man of God. Ezra the scribe led the procession, and at the fountain gate they continued directly up to the steps of the city of David on the ascent to the wall and passed above the house of David to the water gate on the east. Then, verse 38, the second choir proceeded in the opposite direction. How fun is this, yeah? I followed them on top of the wall, together with half the people, past the tower of the ovens to the broad wall, which we've seen, if you've been there, over the gate of Ephraim, to Jaanah the gate, the fish gate, the town of Hanani, and the tower of the 100, as far as the sheep gate at the gate of the guard. They stopped, verse 40, and the 2 choirs that gave thanks then took their places in the house of God, and so did I, together with half the officials as well as the priests, and blah, 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 blah. And the choirs sang under the direction of Jezariah, and on that day they offered great sacrifices, rejoicing because God had given them great joy. And the women and children also rejoiced, and the sound of rejoicing in Jerusalem could be heard far away. Isn't that great? It's like a big parade that went like da 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 da, right? All the way around, yeah. So choir number 1, led by Ezra in a counterclockwise direction, because, scholars, they figure all this stuff out, right? And in the order, Ezra first, then the choir, then Hoshea, the officials, then priests blowing trumpets, and then Levites playing instruments. Meanwhile, choir number 2 going the other way. It doesn't say who led it, and Nehemiah says, I followed. So anyways, we did say led. But they also had the singers, the trumpets, and the instruments. And can I be quite frank? I couldn't help but wonder, was it really like kind of choreographed, or was it just, and I had to look up how to pronounce this word, cacophony. Apparently it's not pronounced cacophony, which is what I was prepared to say tonight, but because you all love to tease me, I looked it up and it is pronounced cacophony. But I'm wondering, you got trumpets, you got singers, and you got a variety of instruments. Was it like wow, pow, bing, bang, clong, or was it, the give thanks to the Lord, our God and King. His love endures forever.
I think it was the Stanford band.
Yeah, I know, running. If you've ever seen the Stanford band, you got to see it. There's no rhyme and no reason to anything they do, yeah? But I just love this joyous occasion. And it got me thinking, usually everybody here has been to a parade, right? Yeah? There's usually a pretty good reason for a parade. You're normally celebrating a victory of some sort, yeah? Usually, not always, yeah? But one commentator speculated it was probably super fun for the people who, remember, a lot of these people worked on the gates and they worked on the walls nearest to their homes. So they were very likely standing there when the band came by. And by the way, I get a little bit chicken skin. I don't mean to be too corny about this or too overly sentimental about it. But when you think about that they were praising God as they went by, like how fun would it be to be on your front porch, right? And have this parade of people coming by, praising God and shouting him for the victory, right? Would you not want to jump in and follow along? And my guess is that's probably what happened. They were probably, darn well the kids wanted to follow the band and all the action until they got down to the temple. And then they said there was big sacrifices, which means what?
Barbecue.
You had barbecue, baby. That's right. It was a big feast. Yeah. Big feast. It says here, the wording's kind of strange, but they did not go into the temple because they weren't priests or whatever, this and that. They were respectful of that. And so now, good timing because we're just about out of time and we're going to read the last bit. Let me just read this all together, verses 44 to 47. At that time, men were appointed to be in charge of the storerooms for the contributions, the first fruits and the tithes. And from the fields around the towns, they were to bring into the storerooms the portions required by the law for the priests and the Levites. For Judah was pleased with the ministering priests and Levites, and they performed the service of their God and the service of purification, as did also the singers and gatekeepers, according to the commands of David and his son Solomon. For long ago, in the days of David and Asaph, there had been directors for the singers and for the songs of praise and thanksgiving to God. So in the days of Zerubbabel and of Nehemiah, all Israel contributed the daily portions for the singers and gatekeepers, and they also set aside the portion for the other Levites, and the Levites set aside the portions for the descendants of Aaron. And it was all going so good.
It was a good day.
What a great day. The end. Yeah. Don't you just wish the book just ended right there? Yeah. So if you saw my email that I sent, sorry for it was late. I forgot to send it yesterday. I sent an email today. If you noticed, I had Lucy holding the football for Charlie Brown. And Lucy, I put, are the people of the Bible. And Charlie Brown is us reading about the people of the Bible. And Lucy's going, isn't it great? We're just serving God here. You can come kick the football while we serve God. And yeah. And we're so happy. And too bad the book just didn't end right there. Yeah. But we're going to find out next week there's a good reason for chapter 13. A really good reason. And it's, like I said, it's going to actually fit our Tuesday night Bible study coming up in May and all of next year really, really well. So let's just not even get ahead of ourselves to chapter 13, but let's just pause here. And that's it. Reflect on the goodness of the moment. Let's be grateful that the walls got built. Let's be stoked that everybody's stoked and that they had a great service and that God was glorified. Before I have just a couple quick applications. In fact, I had 3, but one of them we really did already. Does anybody have any questions or comments on tonight's study? Yes, Daniel. So I'm going to repeat your question for the camera. It's a great question. Why does it seem like, Josiah, they find this scroll that nobody even seems to know anything about, right? They read it, right? And now we're in the same situation again under Ezra and Nehemiah. There's this public reading of Scripture and a mass repentance, which is exactly what happened during the reading of Josiah. And I don't know how many years prior Josiah was, but a few hundred years. Anybody? I don't know off the top of my head the amount of time between Josiah and the return of the captives to Jerusalem, but I'm sure hundreds of years, at least 100 years minimum, and probably a few hundred, if not 500 or 600. And so the question is, well, how often did they neglect it? And the answer is nobody really knows. Right. Sort of like, there's no evidence of them doing the Jubilee year, which, is such an enormously big deal in the book of Leviticus. About every 49 years, all the land goes back, but there's no evidence they ever do it. In fact, that's one of the reasons for the captivity, is to make up the Sabbath years. Remember, the land... I'm looking for Steve Farrell on this because he loves this quote, yeah? The land must have its rest, right? So for all the years they skip the Jubilee, they end up going into captivity, so the land gets the full volume of its Jubilee rest that it was denied. So here's my answer to your question, understanding that nobody really knows, is my guess is more often than not, they neglected the offerings, they neglected the law, they neglected the sacrifices, and they neglected the rites of the covenant. That's my guess, that it was more unusual when they did it than when they skipped it. Now, with that said, from this moment on, for the next 400 years before Christ comes, I don't know, I'm assuming they kept it up. A little bit. Weren't they doing it? I mean, Jesus goes up for Passover, right? Yeah?
That's right.
And by the way, if we're going to give credit, what was the difference, may I preach to the choir, because we're here right now. This is why, right? Because remember, they come back from the captivity in Babylon, and now instead of the word that just getting pulled out for special occasions and only read in the Latin, I'm just being facetious there, right? Yeah? But being read in the ancient Hebrew that nobody understands, they have now since being called the people of the book. This becomes the focus. And that happened during the Babylonian captivity, the elevate. So apparently, if you stay near your word, you stay more closer to the word of God and therefore maintain his will, which is Romans 12 right there. Be transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you might know what his good and perfect will is. With the implication that if you continue to stay in his word, you will be living out his will in your life.
Which we don't hear about them following through with the festival of wood.
Yes, we do. Sorry, but in the time of Josephus, that's what I read, which is at the time of Christ. It is Josephus who writes about the festival of wood, which is interesting because it's not even in the. That's an add-on, right? It's an add-on. But yeah, but that is where I read of the festival of wood is in the time of Josephus, which is during the time of Jesus. But yeah. Yeah.
I'm just going to lose the subject here.
Yeah, go ahead.
It seems like they just struggle with the book and losing it and not reading it, not following commandments, all that kind of stuff. And it takes just being exiled, going to Babylon.
Yes,
maybe
yeah.
Light, and then maybe piece together what all they've had and have the book, because the people of the book, that's what it takes for that. And then from then on, maybe it seems like they didn't lose it. They were able to.
Now, it's a great observation, and I've got a fantastic illustration for you where we see it done again 1,500 years after Christ. There's a very similar thing happening. Did you know that in the Middle Ages, the Dark Ages, a typical church Sunday when you attended was stories of myths surrounding saints and the miracles of the saints. And there was virtually zero teaching of the scriptures on Sundays. So the people of God were completely ignorant of the Word of God. And John Huss, oh boy, here I'm digging deep into my brain. Hold on, bear with me. Who was in Czechoslovakia, Prague's in Czechoslovakia, right? Yep. Anybody? Okay, thank you. He was a Catholic priest in Prague, got a wild idea, crazy idea. He's before Tyndale, yeah, and before Luther, yeah. What happened if I started teaching the scriptures on Sunday mornings? And you know what happened in Prague? That was in 1400 and something. A full revival happened in Prague. Yeah, a full revival happened in Prague because he taught the word. Now, fast forward another 100 years. They burned him at the stake, by the way. But on the stake, was it Huss? Yeah, it was Huss. Yeah, Huss got burnt. Was it Huss or was it Tyndale?
Oh, Tyndale did. For sure.
Which one said on the stake, he said, in 100 years, God will raise up a man who will set your hearts on fire for God's word. And it was almost exactly 100 years later that Luther nailed his 95. I don't know if it was Tyndale or Huss. I think it might have been Huss, actually, that said.
It had to be if it was 95.
Yeah, I think it was Huss.
Came after Luther.
Yeah, Tyndale was later on, right? Because Tyndale was translating it into English. That's what he got burnt for, right? But Huss, when they burnt Huss, Huss was the one who went to the Council of the Council of, not Nicaea, not Constantine, the Council of, whatever. No, I remember if you say it, but there were more prostitutes than bishops there.
Whoa.
And he, in his naivety, thought that, God, it was a 3-year conference and it was just a big bacchanal. Great use of that word. Yeah, hey Josh, how you doing? This is so funny, he naively thought, hey, it's amazing, like almost literally, I found this book and people love it. And as it turns out, there's nothing in here about a pope. Turns out we don't need a pope to go to heaven. By the way, did you know they have his transcripts of what he said at the Council of... They have his transcripts. And when Hollywood, God, back in the day, can you imagine Hollywood made movies about this kind of stuff? They actually they made a full-featured film of the story of John Huss, and the actor that played John Huss spoke his actual, translated into the English, spoke the actual words of John Huss at the Council of blah, 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 right? Yeah? And they burned him at the stake for it. And you're right, Ron. So it was him that at the stake said, in 100 years, God will raise up a man. And it was 100 years later that Martin Luther. My point is, by the way, have you ever heard the story of Martin Luther, who, of course, discovers his salvation in Romans, anybody, 1:13, 2:17, 1:17, for the just shall live by faith, yeah? And, if you've ever heard the, Mason, is that you back there? Yeah, you're going to get this coming Friday. I'm going to read to the Anchor House students Martin Luther's actual testimony that he wrote, that when he read that verse, in his own words, he said, it was this, the gates of heaven swung wide open, yeah?
He was burdened with horrible guilt all his life up till that time because he never was good enough, and he recognized that.
He cursed God for being so holy and making salvation so impossible. And the story was that he confessed for hours at a time and drove his confessors, that's what they were called, nuts. Because how much trouble could you get into in a monastery anyways? And another thing, I coveted Brother Andrew's bread. Really, I wished it was my bread. I don't know what, yeah. Anyway, so to your point, by the way, look how I'm preaching to the choir. This is why we study God's word, right? And this is what has unified us, and this is why the church stands today, and this is why, I'm really going to get on my pedestal right now. I should stand on my chair, but then I'd be out of the camera.
That'd be okay, go ahead.
This is, This is why, as our society and, I'm just going to say it, the liberal church that is drifting from, as Rick says, sailing away from the dock of Orthodox Christianity, to do so, they have to water this down and eventually find it unnecessary until it resembles something completely different. But those who will stick to the Word of God, the churches who stick to the Word of God, just like the Israelites or the whatever, will not cease to function and to know God's will and to do God's will and to be in God's kingdom. There was a little bit of a preaching, sorry, that came out of nowhere, but you got me all fired up on that, yeah. In fact, to be quite frankly, my applications are not, we talked about worldly pressures already. No, I didn't want to say anything about that, yeah. The only last thing I had is kind of silly, but maybe with no more time left, it will end on one little silly note. But remember how they commended the people for going to go live in Jerusalem, the 10%? And I thought that was really neat. And people said, hey, you know what? I know that was hard. That was really good to do. When I read that, I immediately thought of a quick event on Sunday morning. I was standing out there greeting, Easter Sunday morning, I'm greeting, and this young, good-looking, tall, I call him a kid, but he was probably 23, 24 years old. And he was so fired up to be here, and his parents were there, and he's like, man, I love this church, and this is so great, and da-da-da. And I'm like, and it turns out he's a youth pastor somewhere on the mainland, and he said, they let me preach a few times a year. And I said, we have our youth guy preaches once a month, and he was a little jealous when he heard that, And I said, so you're a youth pastor? And he goes, yeah. And he told me a little bit about his youth group. And before he left, I said, hey, can I just commend you? That's what I thought about when I read that. Because people, do you know how grateful I am that I was never a youth pastor? God did not give me the gift of youth work. And the reason why I even say that to you is because if you were around Rainbow Plaza days, in the early days, Rick was the youth pastor and the founding, he doesn't like to call himself senior pastor, but the founding pastor, right? And then I come along and I'm kind of the young pastor, right? You don't know how many times people, like I'd be in Kmart or something, and somebody would see me and they're like, "Oh, Dain, come here. I want you to meet my parents." "Hey, parents, this is our youth pastor, Dain." And I'd be like, "You don't know me, do you?" "I don't like youth." And that's why I went from driving the junior high van to cleaning toilets. Because I'd rather clean toilets than work. So whenever I meet a youth pastor, especially junior high, let's be honest, I commend them. And you should too.
Yeah.
You should too. We commend you.
Curious, how did that come out as one of the applications?
Oh, you missed it. You missed it. Remember it said when the people voluntarily left their towns to go live in Jerusalem, they were commended by the people because they were doing the hard thing. They were doing the hard thing. They took a bullet. They took a bullet for the Lord. And that's the way I view junior high pastors. They're taking a bullet. In fact, anybody who drives the junior high van, Andra's taking bullets every week, driving the junior high van, I thank you, all of you who have ever volunteered to drive. Gosh, I remember one time I stood up here in front of the church and I really laid it on. We needed drivers for the junior high scavenger hunt on Halloween. And I was like, "Come on, everybody, sign up." And I laid all this pressure on the church and it worked. We filled it, we had enough. And then I volunteered to drive and people, I want to slap a couple of those kids. And I was mortified that I had got all these people to sign up to do that. And I'm like, they're not going to come back to our church. The language and oh my gosh. Anyways, so I commend. Let's pray. Father God, we thank you so much for your word. Lord, let me just say this. I'm so grateful for your word, and may I pray on behalf of everybody in this room, and may I even pray on behalf of our church and our churches, God, that we represent in this room, that we will stay close to your word, and that we will pass this love for your word, this dedication for your word, down to the generations that are coming up behind us, Lord. Even as I pray, we have Mason here from the Anchor House, God, 25 young adults in the word every day, God. That we would be the remnant, Lord, on this earth and on this planet, and where we are, your kingdom is, because your will is being done, because we stay close to you, because we stand your word, Lord. May you be glorified in that, and all that happens out of that. In Jesus Christ's name we pray. Amen?